Hi gorgeous, welcome to my channel Soil and Margaritas. My name is Roxana and I am so glad that you're here. Today I have quite a long video. I think it's going to be a long video. So if you haven't grabbed your coffee, your preferred drink, maybe wine, I'm not even sure what time it is outside, but I'm having some coffee right now. I really have been wanting to make this video every year. I don't know if I made it last year. I don't think that I did. I just want to take a recap of the things that worked and didn't, and some things that maybe I won't do for next year. I think that I did a lot in my garden, and honestly, it's going to sound that a lot of things I am complaining. And before I continue, I just want to say that I am so thankful for every single one of you that have watched my videos, that have commented, liked, shared, everything. I really appreciate you guys. I do my best. I honestly do my best to answer questions that you guys may have or just give it a like, but sometimes I just have too much going on at once, and if I can, I just jump in and like some messages, and sometimes I have some extra time that I give a lengthy answer or just a comment, but know that I see you and I appreciate you. I made notes because I'm gonna forget a lot of things here. One of the first things that I did this year, at the beginning of the year, starting with my vegetable garden, was painting my raised beds black. And that was a huge plus for me. That was definitely something good for me, for my garden. I know that a lot of people have their own ideas and opinions about the color black, and that is totally okay. That is totally fine. I always tell you, do what works for you, for your own garden. If you don't like black, don't paint them black. I got inspired by Casey of the Lawrence Farm Network. I'm not sure if she's still around too much on social media or in YouTube, but her garden has inspired me greatly, and if you haven't, you should definitely check her out. So I painted those raised beds black. It was, like I said, an amazing makeover. It was quick and somewhat cheap. The next thing that I did was make an arbor for that vegetable garden, you guys. My vegetable garden is not that big. It's a very tiny space compared to other people who don't have backyards. Yes, it may seem like a huge space, but for me, it's literally, I can just fit a car there. That was my continuance of the driveway on the back of the alley area of the property. When I say the property, I mean my little space here in town. A very small space. I made it work for myself, and it's growing every year. I'm doing something different with that vegetable garden, and I love it. That arbor was definitely the cherry on top for that space. I absolutely love how it came out. My husband definitely made it happen for me, because if I would have done it myself, it would have come out probably a little junky-ish, maybe not, but I love it. I did get a lot of questions about where I got those panels. Those panels were just purchased from Lowe's. A few times in the last few months, I have gotten a direct message of you guys asking, where can I get those panels? And the times, certain times during the year, I check. Sometimes they had it in stock, sometimes they didn't. So if I can, I will link to those specific panels at Lowe's. But I love that they're already black. They're sturdy, they are heavy duty, and I mean, they look amazing, honestly. The pump, that pump in my small fountain that I have against the garage wall, I fought it so much this year. Honestly, I almost quit having that fountain working. I tried several times. I don't know why I'm not trying to, talk bad about companies, but I contacted the company, Campagna International. I contacted them through social media, through Instagram. I contacted via email from their website. I fill out one of their, I don't know, things like, like on their website, like contact us or something, and I never got a response. I just wanted to know what size pump was the right size for that water fountain. I tried a couple of pumps that didn't work. One was like way too big. One was, I think, was maybe the right size pump as far as power, but the size wasn't big. I couldn't get it to fit there. Anyways, at the end, I just purchased one from Lowe's, or it might have been Home Depot, I can't quite remember, but it worked. and I have pictures and notes everywhere about the size and where I got it, and because if it happens again, I'll know where I can get it and all of that. But I fought that so much. Like I said, I almost didn't have a water fountain for this year, and I would have been okay because I was done. After that, it was fine. It was totally fine, and hopefully fingers crossed, that pump lasts me for a few years. This year was my second year trying winter sowing, and I think that I made it work for myself. Last year I tried the single clear like water jugs that you get from the store, and I individually filled them with soil and I put them outside. I think that I took that advice of leave them outside and forget about it to the point, like literally, and I didn't water them. I didn't check on them. I left them actually inside one of my raised beds, and they didn't do well at all. They dried up, nothing came up, nothing germinated, and I wasn't going to try it this year, but one of my friends, Maureen from Instagram, did something with her winter sowing where she purchased a big tub, a clear tub, and she made holes on the lid, and she put individual containers inside, sort of like a small greenhouse type of thing, if you want to say that. And that worked for me. That did it. And there were several things that did well. I show you guys in a video everything that worked well. I am definitely going to try that next year. I do have other things, other techniques that I want to try and see if they work for me. I'm excited because that can free up space in here indoors for all of the things I want to start from seed, and some things that are picky, you know, that need that cool stratification period. So I'm excited for that. That winter sowing technique with the top was definitely a plus for me. And if you're new here and you are watching this video for the first time and you're wondering what the heck is she talking about, I want to know more about this or that, I will do my best to link to every single video or resource that I will have in the description of this video. So before you ask me, you know, like, what do you do with winter sowing? Check those videos, check the description, and if you still have questions, just let me know. Did you see all of the sugar snap peas that I had in that part of my raised bed? I mean, those things were producing hard, even throughout the middle of the summer. I started those sugar snap peas indoors for about a couple of weeks before I took them outside. And I was debating versus giving them space in my raised beds or just putting them in containers, because the last couple of years I have had them in containers and they did okay. They produce and everything, but my goodness, this year I put them in raised beds. I gave them a huge trellis and they blew me away. I mean, they were just amazing. They produce and produce. I think that the fact that they had room for the roots to grow and spread, and you know, they didn't dry it as much as they would as if they were in containers. I think that was definitely something good for me to do. So I know that for future years, if I do sugar snap peas again, I will definitely again start them indoors, and I will take them outside in raised beds or even in the ground. And if you're wondering, why do you start your sugar snap peas indoors? I mean, they're very easy to germinate outside. And yes, if you have the right temperatures, they do germinate well outside. But with my experience from the last few years, for me, I have better germination and quicker results if I start them indoors. I just put them in a small container, used to get them, you know, 3 to 4 inches tall, and then I get them outside. This year, they were definitely taller than that by the time that I got them outdoors, but they were amazing, and I had great results because of past years in containers and how many I had. I planted the same amount of sugar peas in my raised beds, and they produced for the longest time. I kept on harvesting bowls and bowls of sugar snap peas for weeks. Another thing that I did differently this year and that it worked great for me was using one of my raised beds to build a hoop house for hardening off. And that was pretty amazing because I did not have to take every single plant, every single seedling that I had indoors, take them outside, and do that whole process. If you have no idea what hardening off is basically when you start seedlings indoors, when you start your plants from seed indoors, you cannot just take them outside overnight. You have to slowly transition that throughout a few days. You give them a few minutes the first day, you take them back in, you take them outside again for another hour, 2 hours the next day, and on and off. And hopefully hopefully after a few days, a week or so of taking them in and out for extended periods, then they are okay on their own. And that sounds fine, but I have so many seedlings, had so many trays to take in and out, that by the time the first day that I was done taking the last tray outside, it was time for them to come back in. And it's a process. I feel like everybody hates that time of the year when you have to take your seedlings outside. And I know that a lot of people just take them out and, you know, like, hopefully you are good to go. Good luck on your own. But I spend so much time, so much effort and money procuring those seedlings that I just want to give them their best chance. So this year, I definitely tried the hoop house and it worked. And don't get me wrong, I didn't just take them outside overnight into the hoop house. What I did was I took them outside for a couple of days, and then by the third day, I just left them in the shade, and that night they spent their night in the hoop house. And it was just a lot easier for me to open that hoop house on both ends a little bit so that they will have a little bit of airflow, and that work. And I'm looking that way because I have so many seed starting supplies and things that I need to organize, and it's just my mind is just going off. But having the hoop house, having that little space for me to help with hardening off was definitely a plus. Am I going to do it next year? Absolutely. Replacing the roof in our house this year, which, by the way, we're not done yet. We are 80% done, but winter came, time, money, all of that involved. We still have a little section on the back to do, but most of the roof is done. And for those of you that have no clue what's going on, my husband basically took it on his own to replace the roof on our home, and that meant that there was going to be a lot of help from us. And the work really doesn't scare me. What scared me was the fact that I knew that a lot of the plants were going to get damaged in the process. And don't get me wrong, he did his best to protect the plants, to protect the flower beds when he was taking all of those shingles, is that what they're called, down. So there was a lot of protection, but there was also a lot of damage because it is what it is. My no-dig flower bed was definitely trash. I mean, there were things that were just broken or damaged in the process because, you know, he had to build things to do the whole thing, and it was nothing that, you know, that we could have done. I mean, like I said, he did his best to protect the plants, but a lot of the things were damaged. And that was a really bad time for me because just going outside and helping him clean or helping him doing other things with that was just, it was horrible because I will look at my plants. I will look at, you know, 1 or 2 plants getting damaged day after day, and it was just crazy. But thankfully, after a few weeks of TLC and lots of water and some extra fertilizer, things recuperate, and they did look better after all. But I feel like if that wouldn't have happened, that bed would have been amazing. And it was amazing, don't get me wrong, but it's just, it is what it is. Another thing that was also not quite amazing was the fact that a few of my tulip bulbs were rotten in my planters, especially the planters that I had outside, the huge concrete planters. I think that they froze. You know, winter can be really hard here in central Indiana. And the fact that we probably got a lot of rain last year in the winter didn't help my bulbs, my tulip bulbs. I could have protected them a little bit better. I didn't do anything. I just left the concrete planters like that in the open. Snow, rain, really hard temperatures did their thing, and a lot of my tulips rotted. I had some gorgeous Akebono yellow tulips, and they didn't make it. A couple of them did, but it was definitely not a good thing for me. And this year I actually have a bunch of daffodils in those containers, so hopefully they will do a lot better than the tulips that I had there last year. Another thing that I did new this year for my garden was that I built a couple of garden DIY benches, very cheaply done with a couple of 4x4s and some pavers, and I added containers in some flower beds. The ones that I added behind the fountain did amazing, you guys. And yes, I did purchase those baskets. They were not plastic, they were just whatever, bamboo or wood. I knew they were not gonna make it for the next year, and that is fine. In my mind, it's just kind of like a very expensive annual. But honestly, after a couple of months of being there, those baskets, you couldn't even see them. I mean, next year I'll know just to get some cheap containers for that area if I'm going to repeat those again, which I think that I will. But the baskets that I added there with the annuals, which were the coffee cups on each side, coffee cups, elephant ears, and in the middle I have the Some Credible sunflowers from Promo Winners. They did amazing, you guys. That whole area was just so cheerful, and the fact that I could just fit those things in there was just great, because literally it's so small, everything is so tight with the hydrangeas and the honeysuckle behind it right on the wall. It was very, very tight, but I made it work, and I think that it was pretty nice. And on that note, talking about containers, Atlas roses were one of my favorite things this year, you guys. I got those from Great Garden Plants this year. I got a bunch of them, and I wasn't really sure where in the ground I wanted them, so I just put them in containers. That's one of the things that I do a lot. If I'm not sure about the specific or permanent place for a plant, I just put them in containers, whether they're a perennial, an annual, or a shrub. And I know they're going to do great, and it's just another way of me, you know, trying them in one side or the other side of the house and kind of seeing how they do. But the Atlas roses that I had in containers this year were amazing. I even think that I have a clip of some of them in containers still blooming. I mean, they were just pushing it. And I will leave a couple of those shrubs, those Atlas roses, in those containers, and I'm just going to move them into my garage, and hopefully they will overwinter well, so that I can just keep them in those containers for next year. If I had to choose something that was definitely really bad for me this year in the garden, it has to be the tomatoes. I feel like I can't complain because I did have a lot of tomatoes that I harvest, but it was a very, very small percentage of what I had planned to harvest originally. I started about 41, 42 plants indoors, and I took them outside at the beginning of May, and we had a crazy heat spell here in Indiana where we were in the 90s, you guys. I mean, spring just kind of stopped, jumped into the middle of summer overnight, and my poor seedlings that had just been outside for a few days, they struggle. Some of them die completely, and some of them struggle. And by the time that they started, you know, coming back, growing up again, it was kind of late in the season. Things were, you know, the first frost was coming, and I did try a lot of tomatoes for the first time this year that I feel like they didn't quite get the right chance this year. So I'll probably start those varieties again for next year. Well, maybe not a couple of them, but that's another video. The tomatoes definitely struggle for me this year. And like I said, I feel like I shouldn't complain because I did have a lot of harvest. But I had plans to can, I had plans to save a bunch of them, and I couldn't do that because I didn't have enough. But I am thankful for what I got. But this year was definitely, the weather definitely didn't help with a lot of things. And unfortunately with gardening, I feel like that's one of the things that, you know, you just have to face. You have to know that sometimes you just do everything that you can right, and the weather just changes everything for you. Grabbing some hummingbird feeders this year was definitely new for me. I don't think that I had those in my garden before. I do get hummingbirds, a lot of them, and I actually think that they love it here. They love my section of this neighborhood, but I never really had anything that I prepared for them specifically in containers until this year. And I knew that there was a lot of preparation. I knew that I had to be on top of those things because it's not something that you can just leave outside until they finish it. You have to be constantly changing that water, and that was a lot of work. I got a lot of hummingbirds coming there and drinking and feeding from those, but the fact that I have to change that water every 3 or 4 days, it was definitely rough. There were some weeks where I knew that I was just not gonna have the time, and I would just empty those and leave them outside until I had the time to refill them again. But I don't know, and I wonder if you can prepare that water in advance, so instead of having to do that preparation every 3 or 4 days, if you can just have it indoors ready, like in a container. I don't know. How do you guys do your own hummingbird things? How do you guys cut some time and prepare in advance for that? Because like I say, this is my first year doing that, and I definitely enjoy it, but I don't know if I'll do it next year again. Dahlias. I have a love-hate relationship with dahlias because I love them. They are amazing. The flowers are just amazing. You have so many varieties to choose from, but they are picky. They definitely have their own likes, and if they don't like where they are, they're going to let you know and not give you any flowers. This is probably my 3rd year, maybe 4th with dahlias, and what I have found for my zone is that they like it in containers better, but they definitely have to be started indoors way ahead of time. If I just put the tubers outside in the ground, directly in the ground, they take their sweet time coming up, and by the time that they're blooming, by the time that I actually get some flowers, if I do that, it's already, you know, October and the frost is coming, and it's just so slow. Like I feel like I just need a couple of extra months of warm so that I can grow dahlias better. So if I want some dahlias, if I want some dahlia blooms early, like in the summer, I have to definitely start them indoors way ahead of time, give them a lot of light, give them a lot of space, because it's not something you can start in small containers. I mean, they require a huge container to start with so that you can wake up the tubers. And like I said, I love them, but I hate them too. That's very strong, actually. Anyways, I will definitely repeat them next year. I am trying to overwinter a couple of tubers. We'll see how they do. I am not the best when it comes to trying to keep things alive indoors, especially if it's something that, you know, like it needs to be this cold, it needs to be this amount of moisture, and it's just, I have so much going on, you guys. I just can't. But dahlias for me are definitely better if I start them indoors and if I keep them in containers. You just kind of have to play around with them each year and kind of have to figure out what they like for your zone. I am not going to talk about a lot of the things that I started new from seed, but I'm going to mention a couple of them that were definitely a huge hit for me. Loofahs and ginger were 2 things that I definitely wanted to try this year, and I got amazing results, you guys. Loofahs were definitely something that I didn't really have high expectations from the beginning, because from what I read, they were really picky to germinate, and they were really picky to get to transplant outdoors. So I thought, you know, if I can just get 1 plant, that would be great. And if I can just get 1 plant to germinate, but if it doesn't make it outside, that's fine too. At least I try it. But loofahs really did well in my zone. I definitely started them indoors way early. I got the plants to grow huge, and they did struggle. The loofahs struggle a little bit when I put them outside. They went in containers, and they took all that arbor that my husband built early in the year. They almost covered the entire thing, and they did great. I got a bunch of loofahs. I don't think that I did a video of when I took the seeds out of those loofahs, but I did a live on Instagram. And by the way, if you're not following on Instagram, you definitely should, because I have a lot of fun stuff coming for this next month. But I did that live on Instagram where I just took the seeds out of those couple of loofahs, and I knew that I was gonna get a lot of seeds from 1 single loofah, but I got so many seeds. I'm very excited about that. So loofahs were definitely a hit. And another thing also that did really well for me was ginger. It definitely takes a lot of time for growing loofahs and ginger, and I am glad that I did it. And I'm still debating if I'm going to try ginger again next year. Loofahs are definitely a no for me. I did it. I can say that I grew loofahs on my own, but they just take so much space, and space outside is something that I really have to be careful with because I don't have a lot. If I had a few acres, I could, just grow a few loofahs, no problem. But I grow in a very small spot here in central Indiana, and I can be growing a lot of things in that space instead of growing loofah. And like I said, I did it. It worked for me. I'm glad that I did, but I don't think the loofahs are going to be a repeat for me next year. But I'm still thinking about ginger. I don't know. My hydrangeas were definitely something that I experimented with this year. I did the same pruning that I do every year, but this year, because of the heat wave that we had early in the beginning of spring, I decided to add some irrigation to that whole bed, to that whole flower bed where I have my hydrangea hedge. And looking back now, I definitely overdid it with the amount of water that I gave them every week. And I think that really pushed the plant to get stronger and bigger with bigger blooms, but also that meant that the blooms are going to be flopping hard, especially when it rained. And don't get me wrong, I have had those hydrangeas for quite a few years now. They're huge, they're established, and while they do flop a little bit when there is some rain or some wind or something crazy happening with the weather, they flop a little, but they don't stay down. They recuperate in the next couple of days and they go up and healthy looking. But this year, I think that with all that extra water and all that extra growth that they did, they just couldn't handle the wind and the rain as they did before. So definitely something that I had to learn by experience. I am definitely going to keep that irrigation there for next year, but I think that I am going to just cut that section where the hydrangeas are getting all that water, and I am just going to keep on watering the rest, maybe a little bit less than I did this year, but I know that they're going to be just fine for next year. Another cool thing that I did this year for my garden was that I decided to add lights, solar lights especially. If you guys don't know, I love the products made by HostLink USA, and I already actually have 2 of their hose reels, and I love those things. I decided to purchase some of their solar lights that they have. They have a bunch of them. Some of them are not quite like my style, but they do have some that are motion sensor lights outside, and I use those for my stepping stone area. And my goodness, I've gotten so many compliments from people, from neighbors that see me walking through there at night and the whole path just illuminates instantly. It's actually pretty cool. That was amazing. And I don't think that I did a video on this, but I recently added a couple of spotlights under the hydrangea hedge. One is on my lady, the statue that I have in the corner, and I have a couple more for the hydrangea hedge. And I wasn't sure how I was going to like that, but they look pretty good in my opinion. And I'm thinking about adding a couple more for that hydrangea hedge because I feel like each hydrangea should have its own light. Nasturtiums. I love nasturtiums. I think that they are a must in my garden. I will not stop growing nasturtiums in my garden, but they can be a little tricky, I feel, especially if you give them a little too much sun and a little too much heat, which, I mean, I can't control the heat, but this year for me, nasturtiums did horrible. And again, I think it's because of the early heat that we got. They were just a little bit trash. I have a lot of nasturtiums in my raised beds, and a lot of them just fried. By the middle of summer, they were just so trash looking. They were just so trash. They were fried. They couldn't handle the heat well. I keep on thinking that I'm just going to add nasturtiums in a little bit more shade. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about this, because I know that I want them in my raised beds because they help, you know, keeping the bad guys away from my vegetables. But it's one of those things that they just don't handle the heat very well. Is that something that you struggle with too, with nasturtiums and heat? I don't know, but it's definitely something that I am going to keep repeating year after year. Before this video gets extremely long, I gotta mention one more, and this one is not, it's not a success, but it's also not a fail in my opinion. Soil blocks. I tried soil blocks for the first time this year, and I'm actually thinking that I'm going to make another video to talk about this more. I use soil blocks for starting a lot of seeds indoors, and they work, but it's not something that I'm going to do again next year. It just doesn't work for me. And like I said, I'm going to make another video for this so that I can talk about the pros and cons for me regarding soil blocks. So if you have any questions for that, just let me know in the comments, because I'm interested to know how many of you try soil blocking for the first time this year, and how many of you are going to keep on doing that, or why not? Let me know. Okay, I think that that's about it for this video. Like I said, I have a lot of things that I could have talked about. I'm sure that I missed a bunch of them that you are probably wondering about. If you have any questions regarding something specific, let me know and I'll do my best to answer them for you. Thank you for being here, you guys, and until the next time.